as I sit in this frozen vehicle waiting for it to heat up, I have been contemplating so very hard about Star Wars Episode 9. I saw it last night, and I have very, very mixed feelings about it that I would love to cover with you guys. So here's the spoiler-free version of my review. Visually, the movie was fantastic. It was one of the best looking Star Wars movies that I've ever seen. They used props in all the right ways, and in the times that they needed to use CGI, I gotta tell you, it looked phenomenal. There was even one scene very early on, not very early on, but within the first third of the movie, that showcased something that was definitely not CGI. And you can tell it's not. You could tell that it was a prop being used in some regard. But it just looked great, and it felt like the original trilogy. A lot of this movie felt like an homage to the original trilogy. Some of it in story, and some of it in visuals. They went out of their way to use a lot of old props that are definitely from the original trilogy as well. So visually speaking, it's a fantastic movie. Plot-wise, that's another story. I don't know how else to put it. It's okay. It's meh. It is something that's like, they clearly had the idea of what they wanted to do. They delivered that idea, and in order to get that idea done, they came up with so many things that just made it rushed. Things that just kind of happened that were not established ever before in the entire story, but now they exist. And because they exist, they can solve a lot of their problems. Like a good 4 or 5 major issues that show up in the movie are solved by a plot device that just kind of exists now. It's just, hey, this is it. This is a part of the story now. And I don't like that. I think it's a really cheap way out. I think that there's always a way that you can write the story to make it plausible without coming up with like some easy Deus Ex Machina sort of situation. And they just chose not to go that route this time. And I was very disappointed. That being said, this is in the trailers, so I'm not considering a spoiler. Palpatine does make an appearance. I won't discuss any of that, don't worry. But all the roles that Palpatine played, I thought were fantastic. I thought that Palpatine's character was written back into the story in a very good way. It wasn't so convoluted. It wasn't incredibly unbelievable. They addressed a couple of the issues that Episode 8 just kind of like knocked off. Although some of those issues were kind of addressed in a way that's like, what? At least they addressed them, which, you know, isn't too bad. The character writing was okay. Rey's up to her typical annoying stuff of being good at everything the first time that she does it, and that has always bothered me. But her character's not awful. She goes through an arc, and Kylo does as well, that really changes their characters in a lot of ways. And I like that. In addition to that, Poe is a decent character in this movie as well. I know in Episode 8, he was a real piece of work. Just not good. I don't know who decided to write Poe this time, but it was the dumbest thing in the world. But this time around, Poe is pretty good. So, definitely not too bad. Leia, they did record a lot of stuff with Carrie Fisher. There were 1 or 2 moments where you realized this is CGI. But overall, they did an okay job with her. I was really worried about what they were going to do with Leia, and I thought that they did her justice, at least for the good majority of the movie. There was one little bit that I thought, okay, this is kind of convoluted, but hey, to each their own. And then there were the other characters, Finn and Rose. Well, not so much Rose. Rose really is useless. She was useless last time, she's useless this time. Finn plays a pretty big role and does a pretty good job. And then they have the bad guys. There's Kylo, and he's doing his stuff. There's some other bad guys I'm not going to bring up, but new bad guys do show up, and they do an okay job at what they're supposed to be, out there doing. There's new generals, things like that. The First Order is still oddly tough, even though almost all their fleet is just consistently destroyed. By the next movie, they've got a whole freaking fleet again, which is just kind of, good for them. And also the Rebellion. Every single time, I don't complain about this, by the way. This is something that's just, it's part of Star Wars. Every single time the Rebellion is pushed down to being almost destroyed, by the start of the next movie, they're back to being as strong as they were before, which I'm okay with. I have no problem with that. So, the the Resistance this time is, they're okay. It's not like they're just a group that's able to fit in the Millennium Falcon and then that's it. They do some stuff. Some of the older characters play roles. I'm not going to get into detail about that, but there were a couple moments that I thought were kind of emotional. Now, so I'd say storyline-wise, meh. It's meh. Some of the bits are convoluted. Some of them they found easy way outs to explain certain situations just to move the plot along, and I don't appreciate that. But a lot of the characters were actually written pretty well. They didn't go through like massive shift changes and everything and instantly were just like, all right, now I'm gonna make an entire 180 on my personality. They were all okay at worst, and some of them were actually really well written. So the storyline itself was okay. Visuals great, storyline okay. The ending. Was this a satisfying ending to the trilogy? No. No, I say that it's not. As much as I want to say that this trilogy was a good, one overall, it did not have the ending that I wanted. That's a really selfish thing to say. I don't think it had an ending that did justice to it, and let me explain that. Remember how I brought up the Deus Ex Machina stuff? Yeah, the Deus Ex Machina stuff. This ending had a pretty different plot to your typical episode 1, episode 4, episode 6, and episode 7 stuff, where it's like, hey, big ship, destroy core of ship, and you destroy it all, and then you win! Haha! Rebellion celebrate! It's not that this time. It's something different, and I definitely appreciated that. The final battle of sorts, because it always ends in a battle, that's not a plot twist. The final battle of sorts was, visually, it was good. I thought that it was pretty well written for the most part, but the ending was a typical, Justice League, bring in Superman, everything solved instantly because he's just OP, is all get out situation. In addition to that, I feel like even if they had gone that route that they chose to go, they could have done it in a way that made it more, because some of it was definitely fan service type stuff. They could have made it more fan servicey without it seeming really stupid. But there were so many things about the very ending that just bothered me. It showcased some characters that never mattered in the trilogy at the very end, and then it just ignored some people, some established relationships, things like that. It's as if they just don't exist at all. I'm gonna outright say, no, I'm not gonna say, yes, I am. I love R2-D2, and I feel like that droid got the shaft in this entire trilogy, and I hate that. I get that BB-8 sells toys, so that's their motivation to a lot of things, is you need to bring in BB-8, and I like BB-8. Don't get me wrong, I honestly think that BB-8 is a fantastic droid. It's got a neat personality, pays really good homage to R2-D2, but R2-D2 is there, and is a pretty good astromech droid that could have done better in a lot of the situations in this movie than BB-8 was able to. BB-8's a ball that rolls around. It doesn't have jets on it or anything like that. It can't cross tough terrains nearly as easily. And especially in space, BB-8 cannot stand up to an astromech droid. And yet, they just don't use R2 for anything. He's just there, and that annoys me. But in any case, I've gone off the beaten path. The ending was just it was disappointing. It felt like the ending to The Legend of Korra. There's just this big old build up. You think that something really cool is going to happen, and then it's something silly, and the villain is beaten. And I didn't like it. It was another one of those, let's move the plot along things. So let's figure out something that can happen. And although it did have some really good moments in it, the ending was not satisfying to me. So I'm sorry, like, without that ending, it's not it doesn't feel like a real ending to a saga. It feels like it's just was wrapped together, really rushed, and just overall, just because the ending wasn't that great, the whole thing felt like a disappointment. I don't plan on seeing it a second time. I probably will, just to catch some details that I missed, because they do make some references to other Star Wars bits. They do some neat moments, and again, visually, the movie's great, so I might want to see it in 3D. But I think the movie was okay, and that's the best that I can give it. I liked it more than Episode 8. Did I like it more than Episode 1, though? I'm not entirely sure. There were some really cool lightsaber battles, and I mean, honestly, like, pretty dang cool. Like, I won't lie. Some of the better ones that I've seen, it kind of feels like Rey should be a lot more refined in her fighting. She doesn't really seem to have actually improved, and yet she does better. And that doesn't really make much sense to me. Like, her form and everything is still sloppy, and yet she can hold her own against people that you really think that she should be able to get overpowered by. I still don't get how she's as good as Kylo, but hey, it's whatever. So the movie was okay. I'd recommend one watch, just because, you know, it is the end to the trilogy. It's the one we're gonna get. Whether you like it or not, it's not something that we can Sonic movie this sucker on. They're not going to retcon Episode 9. They're not going to retcon Episode 8. They're going to move on and do more things. I've heard rumors that they're going to make another trilogy with these characters. I hope that is not true. I think that they should work on more of the universe. More standalone movies. And if they do another trilogy, do a prequel. Because they've built up the story, and honestly, I thought that Star Wars Rebels was pretty dang good. I thought that a lot of Clone Wars was pretty good. Although some of Clone Wars wasn't under Disney's property. A lot of the expanded lore that's in this was really good. And yet somehow they just can't get the main trilogy of movies right anymore. And I don't know. But that's all that I had to say. Movie's okay. I recommend one watch because it is the end of a trilogy. And I mean, you gotta see it. There's a lot of cool scenes. There's such cool visuals. The movie looks phenomenal. The plot is okay. And the ending was not that satisfying at all. But I do recommend one watch, because the final battle does look pretty dang cool. And aside from the ending, like the last little fight bit, it was a pretty cool final battle. So, give it a watch. That's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.